Thanks, Scott. I wondered what at first you were doing. Like you were giving me a double-handed gesture. When I first came across this, there was such a change that took place that my family thought I was mental. And it had been a really difficult time for my family because I'd split up with my wife at the time, and my wife was my sister's best friend, and she was my mother and father's second daughter. There's a few people on this screen who know her. Beautiful girl, beautiful, fantastic woman. But when I came across this, my life changed. So they were like, "You're back on drugs. You got mental. Oh, he's been radicalized. He's blah blah blah." That was all the responses to it. And one day I got Dickon, who we had on last night. I went to a conference and I saw that you'd actually put out, see, before I knew you put out flyers for Dickon Betting Just Speaking in Manchester. So I bought 2 tickets, one for me and one for my sister, because Lisa and I, being best mates, had not spent any time together since me and Rach split up. And in all honesty, we just drifted completely not apart. And I bought these 2 tickets, one for Lisa, one for I, to go on. And I bought it for Lisa's birthday. And I said to Elise, I bought you a ticket. I'd like you to come, because if you hear something into this, it will be the greatest birthday present you ever receive in your life. And she just looked at me and went, "Nah, that's your weird shit. No thanks, Dave." I was like, all right, cool. So a couple of days later, Ewan, Lisa's husband, at the time, he said, "Lisa, I think Dave's offering you an olive branch, and I think you should possibly take it." So we jumped in the car, and she said, "Oh, I'll go." We jumped in the car, we drove down to Manchester, and we got there. And Lisa, as you'll see, Lisa and I I'm like the moon, she's like the sun. I float around. Lisa fucking moves around. And she's full of energy, and I thought, this is going to go one of 2 ways. She's either going to hear something, or she's going to sit there for 2 days going, "Get me out of here, I need to go for a run." And within she said, "It's going to be full of weirdos, it's going to be full of hippies, it's going to be full of all these people." So she was saying on the way down. I said, "Why don't we just wait and see?" And we got there, and Lisa met people, normal people. And anyway, after day 1, long story short, Lisa heard something. And we went out into Manchester. And this is one of my favourite moments of my entire life. Genuinely, that I think about it now and I'm filled with the emotion of the moment. Where we went for a walk, Lisa and I, quiet. We went and got changed. We didn't say a word, and we just walked around Manchester. And we came across a little Prosecco bar. And this is when we both drunk. And it was full, so we walked around the marketplace and back into this little tent with right in front of this Prosecco bar, right in front of this Asian lad who was singing. And this lad had the most beautiful voice. And we sat down with a bottle of wine, and the sun was just bouncing off the buildings, wasn't it, off the glass, and it was just reflecting the warmth onto what looked like us. And I remember that was the moment my sister grabbed my hand. And I looked at her and she was crying her eyes out. I said, "Lise, what's wrong?" And she went, "Nothing." She said, "I have never felt so beautiful in my entire life." And I just looked at her and said, "Happy birthday." And it was from that moment on where Lisa and I started to move together as a unit again. And Lisa's insight into life and the things that she's gone through in the subsequent years, the things that have fallen off, her observations of life, she's a seriously phenomenal woman. And so it was because of this that we wanted Lisa to share some of her, in her way, some of the things that she's seen about life and how she's come to understand life and the magic that Lisa lives in. Magic. She's an individual who fully lives in magic of life. And so I'd like to just take this opportunity to introduce you to my sister, those that don't know her. And I'd like Lisa to speak now, if you wouldn't mind.
Morning, everybody. So thanks for the introduction, Dave. That was one hell of a weekend. Two of the biggest lessons in my life have been between you and Ewan, and you both seem to have like pointed and jostled me down the magic tunnel of life. I kind of got no idea what I'm going to talk about today, so I'm just going to see what comes up. It's quite funny because I've loved observing myself over the past couple of days and seeing how I was saying to Jen the other day, God, I've had some brilliant chats with myself. I wish I could have recorded what's been going through my mind because there's been all sorts of wonder, and I've loved listening to everybody on this talk, and what I love about life is the creation. So there's all these human beings on this screen right now. That's what makes this possible. It's everybody's participation in these events that make it so magical for everybody, because there is this silent magic in life that lives absolutely everything. And going back to when Dave was just saying about that weekend in Manchester, I actually felt really tearful at the memory of the unburdenment that I felt in those moments. It was literally like I didn't even know, because I was really happy in life, to be honest. So when I met Dickon, well, when I actually was really happy, Dave and I were estranged, and I didn't understand him, and he didn't understand himself, and I didn't understand me, and we were all in the free flow of experience and judgment and misunderstanding. And I remember when I heard Dickon speak, the thing that blew my mind the most was that nothing exists and then it does. So he drew this line on the board. If you imagine underneath my fingers here is formlessness, empty, what looks like emptiness, and then above my hands is form. And he drew this line and he said, from nothing comes everything. Everything comes into creation. And I can remember like looking at myself going, wow, I didn't exist. And then he went on to say, talk about cells. And he went on to say, do you know that we are all, if you break down everything in the universe, can be broken down into the same thing. So you are the same elements as a snake. You're just put together in a different form, but fundamentally, if you break it all down, you're the same. Well, that just blew my mind. I thought, well, what is it that puts the structure into the creations? Well, I'll never know, but the wonderment of looking at life and seeing all of its creations. I can remember sitting in my garden, and I was just reading and doing some writing, and this gust of wind came from nowhere, and it blew all my papers up. All everywhere, like one was down the garden. It was this really localized gust of wind. And I remember noticing it going, what was that? That was invisible magic. That was invisible energy. That, have we forgotten to notice like literally the wonderment and magic in life? And once I noticed the wind, I started to notice all these other things, all these other sort of, that everything that exists is created from nowhere. It comes into being. Even my thoughts, even my world, the content of my world. It speaks to me in a language. It speaks to me in this noise we have called English. We call it English. I loved when I was at a conference in California and I couldn't be bothered to listen. So I went and lay by this pool, like a little waterfall fountain, and I was just lying on the grass. I just literally couldn't get up, and this guy came and frumped next to me, who I thought was Dave. So I got hold of his head and I started going on his head, just being silly. And I looked over and it was Dickon. And I was like, what are you doing? It's like, couldn't be bothered to listen either. But I've had this cool insight. Oh, yeah, go for it. I said, imagine if your thoughts spoke to you in Japanese all day. I was like we wouldn't, we'd just sit there because we don't understand. And we started laughing. It was like, oh my God, we just wouldn't move. And one of the greatest things about, it's really hard to put into words the nature of life because we don't know what it is, but we are it. And one of the greatest things that fell away from me was fear. So I didn't realize till I realized what I realized about the experience of life within me, creating every single moment, everything. I didn't realize how much of that within me was fear. I could sit here for 30 years and tell you how scared I've been of life, of people, not to the point where I wouldn't go and do things, but I've spent a lot of my life running, and I could go for a run and I could convince myself that I was going to get murdered. I could start off running, happy, da, 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 da. I could get 5 miles from home and go, that car's gone past me, they're going to kill me. My mind would start to create this story. And I could run like I was so fit because I just used to shit myself all the time and think I was going to get got. I mean, literally, I was fit as it gets. And it all came from fear. And then it's amazing how this energy of life physically moves our being. It physically moves us. One of the biggest insights I ever had was cycling home after work. And it was 7 o'clock at night. It was near Christmas. It was dark, it was cold, it was wet, it was wild. And I got to a place on the road that I always thought was a bit freaky. And in that moment, all of a sudden, I decided I was getting chased. Somebody is chasing me. I'm going to get killed right now. And I cycled like you wouldn't believe. Adrenaline came in, physically shaking, and I'm pedaling up this hill. Again, you'd have never caught me. There was this creation came into me and powered my being, and I got up this hill, puffing, panting, shitting myself. I could even hear the footsteps behind me. I got to the top of this hill, put my hands on my handlebars, and I stopped my bike, and I put my feet on the floor, and I was on my own in the dark, in the rain, and I started laughing, like belly laughing at the, wow, look at that. Look what just happened. I am physically reacting. There's nothing there. I'm just cycling up the hill. That moment blew my mind. Because even when I got home, my physiology, my body was still reacting to that thought. But I'd seen it. This awareness came into being through and woke me up to that thought. I have got a million examples of this, of falling in to a thought, feeling it, reacting to it, and then coming out of it. And the thing that it shows me is the fluidity of existence, of all existence. the fluidity of the nature of existence. Now, I used to always live in this state of fear. So I would get home and I could even create a story how I was chased, because that was my reality, but I didn't know it. And actually, it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad place to be, because I didn't know any different. It was just my life. Dave used to live 14 doors up from me. And because we spent our whole lives hanging out together. And we bought this house 14 doors from each other on a really nice little housing estate. And I used to leg it from Dave's house to my house, past 14 houses, loads of people around, lovely people. I'd get in my house, I'd shut my door, I'd shut my blinds, I used to have this little window in my kitchen, and I'd put a file against it. I'd shit myself. Then when I was in, I was okay. Just thoughts that I believed to be true. I didn't know any different. It's coming through me, coming through me. Something happened that weekend with Dave. And it was almost like just this we all are this. We all are this entire life. None of us have anything more than anybody else. We're all perfect. Everything is, we're all perfect. Life doesn't make mistakes. The creation doesn't make mistakes. I remember once I started to see this, I can remember going for a walk one day. I'd been around to my mum and dad's, and I went for a walk. I used to be terrified of the dark, terrified. And I went for this walk with a dog. I came home and my dad was waiting on the gate, and he says, "Lisa, where have you been? You didn't take your phone." I was like, "Why?" And he went, "Dad." I was like, "Oh yeah, sorry, Dad, I'm not scared anymore." And all the fear dropped away. All that fear that I'd lived in. And I started to notice stuff that held me back. I started to notice that who I thought I was, Lisa Elleray, the fittest woman in the world, was like a confinement. And when I noticed that my ego, which was, I always had to be the fittest, strongest person in the world, and I actually was really fit and really strong, because I couldn't be not. So I didn't know who I was without it. I didn't realize this was just who I was. And I remember after coming across this realization, Ewan and I used to do a lot of long distance hiking. We hiked the Haute route from Chamonix to Zermatt over the Alps, and we hiked the AV1 in Italy, and other walks. Now I would have to walk every inch of that route. I would never take the cable car, even if I was knackered with my leg hanging off. We were gonna walk it all. That was a confinement, because that didn't leave me open to anything else to come in. I can remember on this walk one day, we got to this, we were tired out, we got to this ski hut, and Ewan said, "Oh my God, have you seen these scooters, Lise? Can you imagine going down that piste? We're right on the top of this mountain." And it was like the bit we got to was like a ski piste, and it went down into a place called Champex, I think. I can't remember, some of you might know it. And I was like, "Oh no, we can't do that." And it wasn't because I wanted to walk it, it was because I always fall off everything because I'm clumsy. So I'd created this story. He's there going, like totally open, going, "Oh, let's do it, it'd be so much fun." And I'm there going, "You go, I'll get the cable car, because I'll definitely hurt myself." So I'd already decided how this was going to look. And then something caught me. That little voice that lives in us all, that moves us, in a beautiful direction, it went, what have you done? You're going to miss this. You're even going to miss this. Even if you fall off and break your leg, it'll take you on another adventure. So you could stay in the safe zone, which is getting the cable car, or you could get on that scooter. And I started to shake. It's like, oh, we get on the scooter. This scooter's massive. I was like, Ewan, let's get the scooter. So we got this scooter. What a laugh. I mean, to this day. And I got to the bottom of this hill. We were scooting down. He was shooting off, and I was coming down tentatively, but I was doing it. And I got to the bottom and I thought, how much of life have I missed? Not that I could have ever been anywhere else. How much have I missed because I thought I'm a certain kind of person? I thought that I can. I put my faith in the can. I put my faith in the categorization of life. And the free flow couldn't come through. But the more I started to wake up and notice, just started to notice. Now, I didn't do anything to start getting this noticing. But what it brought me was so much freedom to experience more of life. And on the back of that, I've gone from being the most frightened person in the world of people to loving people like and trusting people like I never knew was even possible. And within that trust, which I would call the wisdom of life living through, has brought so much openness to life. No barriers, no edges, just a fluidity. And like Dave says, I've probably had the most challenging 5 years of my entire life. I mean, really, really, really. But I found so much beauty in allowing, or not even allowing, but just noticing the feelings that are coming through, which is why Beju, before when you were speaking, I could really resonate with how you were feeling. And I started to live within that space of knowing it's okay to feel all experience. It's all the beauty of life. I loved the day when I woke up and I opened my eyes and I went, fucking hell, I'll never get this day again. I will never get this moment in my life again. What will this day bring? Who will I meet? Where will I go? We're so creative. This creativeness lives through us, and within this creativeness, it can bring us the future and it can bring us the past. And this creativity moves us around. I can remember Dave once going off to a tree surgery do. I had this understanding. He'd gone off to whatever this understanding is. But he'd gone to this tree surgery do at the Plough in Lupton, and it was winter and it was cold and it was wet. We live next door to each other now. And he said, yeah, I'll be back by 11:30. 11:30 came, and I noticed, I haven't heard his car come back. I haven't heard Dave come back. Ringing, no answering. My mind went to, he's dead. He's had a car crash. Fucking brother's dead. I'm never going to see him again. Oh my God. I was there. Do you know what? When I was there, I knew I was there. I can remember looking through the steam on my windows. I live in a caravan. I was looking through the condensation in this daymare, in this thought creation, this little film. So I start ringing his mates. Has anyone been to Dave? No, he left ages ago. Fucking hell, left ages ago. He's going to be dead now. Oh my God, he's dead. I'm never going to see him again. I woke up. Dave turned up. Had a great night. Been chatting to his mate in the car in the lay-by. where had I been? And also another, oh God, so many, I've had so many things in my mind that I felt like sharing. And one of them was, it's funny how life brings you your biggest nightmares. And then it shows you that it's the most changeable thing ever. It's not static. I was lying here one day on the 23rd of December 2018 or 2017. I was living on my own and I was lying in bed. And I've been to my friends for dinner, and my biggest fear would have been, living in all that fear that I lived in, would have been somebody breaking into where I live. And I live kind of remotely. I actually live in a wood, pretty much, I would say, next to a road which then borders the A591 that goes into the Lake District. And I was lying in bed, and all of a sudden I heard somebody try my door at about 12:30 at night on the 23rd of December. I kind of woke up and thought, did I hear that, or have I made that up? Then I got a bit worried, so I got up and got my poker from my fire and put it on bed. And then the beautiful thing is that I knew that I was okay. I knew nothing was happening. There would have been a time where I would have probably crawled out of my window and just run and never stop running through being terrified. And if somebody had said to me, what would you do if somebody broke in? I'd say, oh, well, first thing I'd do is I'd get under my bed and hide. And then I'd try and get my phone and ring the police. And I had this preconceived idea of how I would behave if somebody came and broke in. Anyway, on Boxing Day at 4 o'clock in the morning, this guy came back. And he was really trying to get in my caravan. And I was woken at first by a torch coming through the window and my door getting ragged. I mean, like trying to get it, yanking it off its hinges. And I woke up and I dived out of bed and I shouted, who's there? And this voice, it wasn't even a word, it just made a noise. And I got overcome by something that was so big. It was massive. I filled this caravan, I filled this land, and I just shouted, go away! And I got my key and I opened my door and I flung my door open and this guy stood there and I just shouted, go away now! And I got overcome by this power. And I even to this day say, that wasn't me, but it was me. That was life bringing me exactly what I needed in that moment. If you'd asked me how I'd have reacted, I'd have been under the bed terrified. It wasn't true. We never ever know what life's going to bring. I watched this guy leg it out of my driveway. And then I shut the door and I locked the door and I went and stood in the middle of my caravan and I was like, oh my God, fucking terrified now. So I'd gone from this one state to another state in the blink of an eye. And what I love about this is that if this had been the frightened version of me that hung on to these thoughts of who I was and fear and everyone's going to get me and this is how life looks, I would have never been able to live here again. So that night, or that morning, I rang my dad and I was like, Dad, you're going to have to come and get me. Well, he didn't answer the phone because he thought I was his friend's phone from Tasmania at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I was on my own. And I was stood so thin in the middle of my caravan, like I was like a pencil. I'd shrunk because I was putting all the blinds down and there was nobody to help me. Eventually got hold of my dad and we drove around the streets and I got filled with this love for this man. I got filled with love. The fear had turned to love. And it was like, I wonder what it is that made him want to break in. I wonder what it is within this human. And within that, I saw the innocence in his actions. Because whatever lives me and creates my experience lives him and creates his experience. And I think that was one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen in life, is that if I work this way, then so does everybody else. It opened me up to seeing the innocence in everybody, in every single thing that exists. And when I say innocence, I just mean that if we could choose what we thought, we could choose our experience, we'd always choose to live in a happy place, but experience flows through us. And as long as we can see that and know that and connect to that truth, if life gives us the gift which it's giving us, we're all here to share the magic of life together. Lee, I loved what you were talking about the other day. When you were talking about smashing everything up, I was like, wow, the power of creation makes us move in ways when we do these things. They don't feel great, but it's creation at play. I remember walking my dog up a place called Doug's Reservoir, and I had this insight of the power of thought, how a thought can come in. It's so creative. Within the moment, we could shoot somebody, we could tell somebody we love somebody, we could do a handstand, and then it's gone again and it doesn't exist anywhere on the face of the earth. It comes in and it goes out, comes in and it goes out, it comes in and it goes out, and that's all that's ever going on until the thought comes that we're getting nowhere, nothing's ever going to change, it's just a creation, which then changes because life shows us that it's a continuity of changeableness. I don't know if they're words, but I quite like them. So on the back of the realization of the fear falling away, I didn't suddenly go, I'm not scared anymore, because I do get scared every now and then. I know what it is. But it allowed me to travel on my own, kind of realizing that the more we fall out of what we think we are or who we think we are, there is more space for fresh thought. There is more space for fresh experience. And you can see how we can trap ourselves by thinking we're a certain kind of person, or we're never going to do this, or I don't like that. No, it's not for me. Well, look what the insight within me when Dave offered me to go and see Dickon. Thank God Ewan said that, because I would have sat in my stubbornness and I wouldn't have gone just to spite him. But something moved within me that made me go. The openness. I would say that realizing the nature of existence and all existence can bring an openness and a space within us where we can have something fresh. I remember I decided I wanted to go away to Costa Rica. This thing came in, it was like, go to Costa Rica. It was unquestionable, I couldn't get away from it. So I went on my own, and I found the most remote hostel that I could find, which is in a little place called Dos Brazos. And people would say to me, are you not scared about all the bugs and all the creatures and all the stuff that can kill you out there? And I was like, no, I can't wait to see all that beautiful creation. I can't wait to see it, because I don't see it as any different from me. But what about when you're in the dark on your own? No. And then just having those conversations makes me realize that all the layers of belief that I had about myself just started to slide away, to be replaced by more different ones. But the experience changes, it doesn't stay in a stagnation. It's allowed a fluidity. And I remember being in this hostel. I had no idea how I was going to get to this place, and it's only now when I look back at it, I see that I was guided the whole way through it. Life took me to that place and showed me so much wonder of the kindness of people if you open your heart and you allow life to live through you. I met this girl at the airport, Kelly. She's nuts. She was really wildly ginger Canadian with a huge mouth. She was hilarious. Anyway, we followed the same track, and I ended up managing to get a lift into the middle of nowhere to start this journey to this hostel. And I can remember thinking, oh my God, am I in a dream? What am I doing in Costa Rica on my own? There'd have been a time where I was so frightened. I got trapped in a car park on my local walk because I was convinced there was some Polish guys going to kill me in the car park. You know, that's where I used to live. And I got to this hostel and I was by myself, and I met some beautiful people. This little family were there, and I met this guy who looked like a white supremacist, and he was Peruvian, big guy. He was actually American, but he was Peruvian. And he sat there and he says, I'm just sat having dinner, minding my own business. And he comes up to me and he was like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And he's telling me how he lives in Peru. Heard about these female travelers that are getting raped and murdered, single ones. And I was like, oh, this is nice. Oh, feel free, please tell me. Like, fucking hell. I'm staying in an open-sided cabina on my own in a rainforest in the remote parts of Costa Rica. Hello there. Thank you for this conversation. But the beauty of it is, I could see that what lived me lived him. I could see he was in a thought creation. Thought was bringing in this, and I almost kind of see it now as like a message to me. What is he showing me in this moment? This guy's talking about this. What is he showing me in this moment? And what it showed me was I could see it. There had been a time where he would talk about that, and I'd have been so frightened of that man because, you know, my cabina was open to the elements. You could just walk in and out of it. Anybody could. And I kind of loved this guy because I thought, God, I wonder how many conversations I've had with people where they thought, oh, she's freaking me out. Or I realized that was no different to this guy, but this conversation came. And within this conversation, it like planted a seed. So I went to bed that night. I went to bed with this massive smile on my face, thinking, God, I'm so glad I can see myself sometimes. That I lay in my bed with acceptance of, oh well, maybe this is where I die. But I was quite cool with it. Well, maybe this is it. Maybe this guy he's gonna kill me tonight. And then I laughed at myself again. And I went to bed and I fell asleep all night. And I woke up in the morning and we had breakfast together and we had a great chat. But there'd have been a time I'd have never experienced that. And it's more like the more curious about life I've got, I call it like soul food. I'm lucky to be surrounded by people like Dave and Jen, like Anna and Liam and Ewan, my mum and dad, and be able to be mad as anything, but know it's okay. And I think if we feed our souls with goodness and we never stop being curious about life, it will always lead us in a good direction, even when we are in the darkest place. Oh my God, the darkness. The darkness is massive, but we all get it. It's ordinary. When Jackie was talking yesterday about trauma, I thought about how life can feel so individual sometimes, that we're the only person who experiences trauma or heartbreak or loss or hurt. But we all get it at different times. These energies come through us, this thought creations comes and creates all different scenarios with people at all different times. I could be having the time of my life. Dave could be having the worst time of his life, and vice versa, but it never stays still. It's always moving. Always. This fluidity of life is always moving. And when Dave said the other day about having our answers and our questions, for those of you who know me, Ewan and I had a dog called Ben. And the way I got Ben is a whole other story, but that dog came across my path and changed my life. Some girls had been trying to drown him in a park in Blackburn. I met a lady who said, oh, he's thick, we don't even want him. Do you want him? And I was like, yeah, but I'm going to Thailand. Oh. Sat on my bed, tossed a coin, heads I went to get him, tails I didn't. It was heads. I thought, oh shit, ran home. Everyone's saying, can't bring your dog home. I did it. And it turned out, Ben turned out to be the best thing that ever happened in my life, ever. And the way I got him was through this job that I took the kind of plunge and dared myself to take. And I got my dog and he introduced me to the mountains. And Ben was with me for 10 years. Me knew him for 10 years and he'd come to work with me. And he was like, we never really had to look after each other. We just hung out. And when it got to the end of his life, he started to get really old and he started to become incontinent. And I can remember lying in my caravan one day on my own, looking at him, thinking about the day he was going to die and what life would be like without him. Literally, I'd actually collapsed by my door. With this understanding, I was on the floor, hugged around my dog, like bawling my eyes out. And Dave walked in. Elise, what's going on? I was like, how am I going to live without him? What are we going to do without him? How are we going to look without him? Dave just really gently said, Elise, look at him. He's still here. But my mind had taken me to his death. I was already there, but I was creating an idea of how I thought it would look. And actually, when it came down to it, I got to work one day and he used to sit under my workroom table. I'm a seamstress, so I sew and make curtains and things. And Ben was always under my workroom table, covered in reams of fabric. I mean, some of my clients could have seen what their curtains went through. The dog was like, oh, everywhere. Anyway. And there's this one day where I believed that the energy of life should be allowed to turn out its own light. So I would have never, ever put Ben down. This is one of the biggest lessons. Ewan and I had talked about it. And I said, I don't want to put Ben down. I want to wait till his light goes out. And he was like, cool, we'll do that. I used to wake up every morning and he'd still be alive. And I'd be like, oh, Ben, you need to go. He's so old. He's so old. He's so cool. Such a cool dog. Such a cool boy. And I was at work one day and his eyes had become pitted and dry. And I just looked at him and I went downstairs and I picked up the phone and I rang the vet Mary. And I said, Mary, could you come and put Ben to sleep? I didn't even realise this was going on. I got home that night and Ewan came home and there'd been a power cut. So we had no electricity, so we lit the fire and we lit some candles. And I picked him up and I carried him around the fell in this blanket. He was a collie. He was a collie dog. Collie cross Saluki. He was beautiful. Best friend, total bestest friend in the world. For both of us. And carried him around the fell and all the stars went up. It was beautiful. In fact, oh my God, it was the 30th of November. Is it the 30th of November today? What date is it?
29th.
Okay, it's 5 years ago tomorrow. And the stars were all out. It was beautiful. We brought him home and Mary came round and he was just lying by the fire so peacefully. And she went to inject him to kill him. And Ewan and I were both sat on the sofa. And then I panicked. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And Mary just put a hand on my leg. She said, it's okay. It's okay. And I was like, oh, no, what am I doing? And then really peacefully, he went. And I got covered in this bubble of warmth. I mean, engulfed. Completely engulfed. And I could feel it was Ben. It was like this love. And I was just staring at this empty vessel in front of the fire. He was empty. And in that moment, I realised that we never truly go. This is my observation of life. This is not to say it's true for anybody else. But I felt that so deeply. And we went and we buried him. We'd already dug his grave, we buried him. It was the weirdest thing, because we live in a caravan and always having to step over it. Like, you go for a shower, you'd lie on the shower mat and step over it. It was the weirdest thing getting used to being there. I remember that night I started just cooking tea. And that's when it occurred to me that I didn't do any of that. Rang the vet, put him to sleep, buried him. Everything I thought I would never do. And that was when I realised that we have these questions that come via our thoughts. What am I going to do about this? What am I going to do about that? And then all of a sudden, when we're ready, the answer comes. And it just moves us. And it's effortless. It's effortless movement. And I actually wrote this thing about our answers and our questions come from the same place. They come from the same place. We'll always have questions and we'll always have answers. It's the nature of life.
On that topic, Liz, we've got 20 minutes before brew time. Do you want to take some questions?
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing that's just popped into my head. The biggest thing I've found in life is trust. To trust my life and other people's lives. To trust that other people's lives know what's right for them. Because I've been in a position where I've watched somebody suffer and wanted to change that. But realising that when the time is right for that person, their wisdom comes through them and moves them. That we don't have to fix anybody. We just have to trust ourselves. Trust the life that lives us and creates us and makes us okay is exactly the same thing that does it for everybody else. Yeah, so some questions there. Anyone stop me?
Liz, I really love that. That was really beautiful. Thanks so much, Liz. Does anybody have any questions? Observations? Has anything kind of occurred to somebody as Lisa's been speaking or rung true, something that perhaps rings true? Now we'll take comments and questions. I can't see both screens at the moment, so if somebody's raising a physical hand, I won't be able to see, but just unmute yourself and say your name.
Hi.
Hi, Beck.
Hi there. That was huge for me, actually, listening to you, Lisa. It was amazing. Because what you were saying about having these thoughts about somebody trying to kill you or those kind of things was like, I hadn't seen it, but I had that, but it was to do with my kids. Even from them being tiny babies, I remember getting up in the night and having to watch them breathing regularly because it's like they're going to die. You know, they're just going to die. And I used to create this thinking of something horrific's going to happen to them. And I remember my son got run over when he was 5, and it's like, there you go, see, it happens. And there was, and just when you said it, I hadn't seen it this clearly, how much I was making it up. But even until, like, my kids are now 18 and 20, and I used to have this thing where I always had to have my mobile phone on at night if my kids were with me, always. And I hate having my mobile phone on. In fact, I don't even like the internet on or anything in my house at night time. I just want everything off. And but I had to have my phone on because of my kids, because if they ever need to contact me, I have to be able to, for them to be, you know, it's like crazy. And I've noticed over the past few weeks, because my kids have recently moved out over very difficult sort of circumstances. They're really, in their mind, they hate me basically, and it's been tough to deal with. And I realized I turn my phone off every night now. I have no thinking about it. And I don't have the thinking that anything awful is going to happen to them like I used to have, which I've had for most of their lives. But now I don't know, I turn it off, and just listening to you, I kind of know that even though they've got all this, at the moment, this kind of real thinking, real hatred kind of stuff going on for me, because they think I'm a bit crazy. I mean, I can't believe it's taken this long to realize that. But they really think I'm mad with my beliefs and how I live my life and what I'm doing in my life. But I just saw that, oh my God, they are connected to this. They don't need me to have my phone on all the time. They don't need me to be there. And that's okay. And it was like lovely to, it's just amazing to listen to someone else say something like that. It's like, oh my God, you too.
Oh yeah. I think the biggest thing I ever realized ever in life was that, and it was actually something that Jen said to me. She said, they have everything inside them to be okay, the same way you have everything inside you to be okay. Boom.
Yeah.
Freedom. The freedom to be able to let go and realize that I know nothing.
Yeah.
I don't know what's right for somebody's life, but I do know that you can walk alongside somebody even if they really fucking hate you.
Yeah.
If you don't take it on board, it gives them, if you can see the impersonal nature of life, the impersonal nature, it's only when we take things personally and we make a meaning about ourselves that we will suffer. Beck, walking with a friend around Grasmere. Do you remember that walk we did when you came to David Lynn's retreat? Yeah. We had an amazing conversation, and I can remember it word for word. It was like, and we were talking about the coronavirus, and we were talking about, we went round in big circles and everything. I kind of realized it's the first time in the history of humanity that we've all got this singular focus. All our minds are working on the singular focus. And then I realized how much we've made this about human beings, and how much we have, when you look at every single other thing that exists on this planet is benefiting from the fact that we've slowed the pace of life. And I realized the only time we ever really suffer is when we separate ourselves from the whole of everything. And that separation can even be from other people by putting ourselves in a little capsule of individuality. Even if that little capsule is like, oh, I think I'm the only person that feels like suffering. But when you realize the ordinary nature of it all, the connection to all things, it takes away the personalness, the personal attack that life can feel like for some people. It's not to dismiss any of that, by the way. I remember listening to a brilliant talk at the Global Conference. Beck, you might have even been there, I'm not sure. And it was about a lady who had 3 children. 2 of them were Down syndrome, and 1 of them had autism. She was a Jewish lady, and I remember her standing there saying she'd spent 12 years of her life thinking her life should have been different. Because she'd spent 12 years changing nappies of these 3 kids who shouldn't have been like that. They shouldn't have been like that. They shouldn't be like that. She was told it shouldn't look like this. This isn't what having a family looks like. It should be, these children should be able to grow up, fly the nest, have an education. Brr. And she realised, I'll never forget her standing on the stage and saying, I'm going to use the word God. She said, God did not take its eye off the ball when it made my children. And she said, the minute I saw that they were perfect, exactly how they were, she said, I started to see my children and be with my children. I started to love them, listen to them, because I wasn't in the thought creation that there was something wrong, or that I needed to change, that she needed to change. I'll never forget listening to her on the stage and just being like, wow. When we can accept life as it comes, it can flow. When we think it should look a different way, we trap it.
Yeah.
You hear all the mystics in life talking about water, about how Bruce Lee, be like water, be fluid. It's what's always going on. It's what's always going on. We're always in motion. The fluidity of creation is always in motion, always continually. And we can get stuck and snagged in creation, and we can get in a little pond and have a little stagnate because it feels so personal. But I loved what you said yesterday, Dave, about what creates the creature creates the plant, the creature to eat, to the continuation of, there is this order in the chaos that's beyond just of the individual human. There is this order in the chaos of all existence, and we're part of that. Where have you gone, Beck? I can't see you. Beck, when you were saying about going down to the beach, I got so excited for you. Just thinking, I love it when life moves us and it feels right.
Yeah.
And there's going to be all the opinion raining around it, but there's something about that some people call it a gut feeling.
Lise?
Yeah?
We've got 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I know that, Em, you had a question before, and so did Leanne. Would your question be all right for Lise?
It wasn't, hi guys, everyone. It wasn't a question, it was more a sort of like reflection really on what Lise was saying, you know, about sort of like, oh my God, I've had so many sort of like boom moments really in these last few days, which has been absolutely insane. But so it's just really about sort of death really. So I lost my mum very recent. Her funeral is tomorrow. And I come from sort of really an OCD background, like quite heavy. So I've experienced it very, very differently this time. So I cared for my mum with my sister for the last 4 weeks of her life. Previous to that, my mum struggled. She had COPD, which is, if anyone knows anything about that, it's a really horrible disease to die of, really. And when my mum was in her head, I had a lot of insight around it. When my mum was in her head, when she was obviously, you know, she had a lot of fear about her condition and a lot of fear about dying. She struggled a lot when I could see she was in her head about the fear side of it. And in her last few days, where she was heavily sedated, to the point that she was in a coma near enough at home. We cared for her at home. There was none of that. Like, it was really beautiful for me to see the difference, the connection between the physical and spiritual. I watched her, like, even though, like the doctor said, she still has COPD in latter stages and she's still dying, and her body is literally, her body was giving up, her kidneys, her lungs, her heart, everything, brain. We saw all that in the lead up to those last 3 days. But in the last 3 days, it was pure, I was like honoured to sort of be there watching it, because when her mind settled and the thoughts weren't going mental, she was completely just at rest and just quiet. And for me, that was beautiful. It really was. The other thing I wanted to share is the fact of how I've seen other people around me experience the same thing. So we've all sat in the room and experienced that, but yet we've all experienced it very, very differently, depending on what's going on in the brain, what thoughts we're all experiencing. So that was a really interesting thing for me, because a lot of people, even like the funeral tomorrow, a lot of people going, oh, well, I'm not going to be in a good headspace, so don't speak to me. I'm not going to be able to cope with this, cope with that. Where I'm just going with the flow. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to be like. I just don't know. I mean, you know, until it happens. And that for me is sort of refreshing in a weird type of way, because I'm okay with that. You know, like last night I had a mad fit of giggles with my sister. We were literally pissing ourselves laughing about the most. And actually a week ago, when my mum was in this very room where I am now, in bed, dying, and everyone, me and my sister, had this fit of giggles at 2 a.m. Like literally we could not stop, like, and we were almost taking the mickey out of the situation. And then we were like, oh my God, we feel really guilty for this. Like, we shouldn't have done that. That is really disrespectful. But yet we couldn't help ourselves. It was like, I call it lack of sleep, basically. And like, you know, no sleep for 4 weeks. But I was okay with that. Where when my dad passed away, it was a very, very different scenario. I didn't laugh. I grieved. I pushed everyone away. I made it very much personal. And what Lise said, which was beautiful, it's like, yeah, the impersonal part of life. Take yourself out of the equation and what is here. And I honestly thought that when my mum passed away that I wouldn't be able to go back in the room. I was very strong on that. I'm not going back in the room once she's died, you know. And I did for quite a lot of time after. I kept dipping in and out the room while we were waiting for the coroners to come, you know, dipping, you know, the people to come and take her. I kept dipping out. And I just saw that, like, it's a vessel, like Lise said. She'd gone way, maybe a couple of days before, I think she'd gone. Her body was just there, just doing its thing. But, so for me, I don't know, I could just ramble on forever. But the other thing, like going back to being like childlike, like Dickin and Dave, and we've all been talking about that childlike part of us. I have an 8-year-old daughter. Now, I have an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old son, and a 17-year-old daughter. And my 8-year-old said to me yesterday, how are you, mummy? I said, oh, I'm having a bit of a day today, but I'm okay. And she said, mummy, just don't think about Nanny, because when I think about Nanny, I get sad. But when I don't think about her, I know she's okay and I'm okay. Oh, my God. Wow. The pure wisdom coming out of that 8-year-old is phenomenal.
We think wisdom comes with age, don't we?
Blew my mind away, honestly, where yet my son and my daughter are experiencing it very different because they're caught up in the mind.
There's also what I'm loving about what you're saying, and that is the beauty of the flow, when you can allow life to move through you however it shows up, no preconceived ideas. Life can be fluid, it can flow through. You can go to the depth of despair and the heights of euphoria like you and your sister did last night in a second, because you have the availability and the freedom and the allowance of life to live through you without, and then you can experience so much more than the grief, because it will come, but then it will go, and it will come, and it will go, and it's the nature of life. I'm so sorry you've lost your mum. I love what you just shared. Like, I love what you just shared. So beautiful. And when there's no expectation of how you have to be, you can be anything.
Exactly, and that's from knowing what I know. You know, like, I mean, Dave and Jen, I just love them. They've been like, Dave and Jen have been amazing. I mean, they know me and my husband. They know what we've been through. And Dickin was the other man that I had my massive insight with. And to spend a weekend like this, wow, you know, and it's right what you say, Lisa. It's just going with the flow. And that's all I can do, you know. I mean, even just when I started talking to you guys, I could feel myself, I was going to cry, and I was like, oh my God, don't do that. But now it's gone. I'm absolutely fine. And that's what we're pointing to, just that up and down, that just in and out.
Always has been, always will be a continuation of experience.
And just going back quickly to Claire and, it's Grumpy today. So Claire and Grumpy, the fact they were saying last night that they couldn't sleep, you know, that happened to my husband. Dave knows about my husband's insight. He literally for 3 days was like buzzing for life. It was insane. I was like trying to sleep, and he was like, I've had enough sleep now, let's get up, let's start living. And I was like, what the hell, you know? So yeah, I just love you guys. It's just great. This is just what I needed. And even this, sitting here in this room doing this, people are going, aren't you supposed to be sorting things out? You've got things to sort out for tomorrow. You need to sort your shit out, you know? And I'm like, I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing. I'm spending an hour doing this, or, you know. And from my OCD background, it's very much like I should be doing. So my thoughts are playing, you know, coming in. Actually, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be sorting out what I'm going to wear tomorrow or whatever. Who cares, you know?
Right now, there.
So what? You've got OCD? Like,
well, I haven't actually. That's just
but it cracks me up. I was thinking this morning about how we talk about ego is anything we believe about life to be true. We believe that we have these categories. I know how I can tell them that how you've got this beautiful flow that's like gorgeous. But you can see how, like, when we get these labels, it's still trying to catch the flow, and it just stagnates it. And so what if you go and sort stuff out? And I don't know really what the content of OCD is. I've got my idea of it. But what if we just let life live and flow without the idea it should be any other way?
The judgment
that we put on ourselves. And there's so much influence. We are so influential. We can talk about this beautiful green book. In this book is some good stuff. But our minds will work on it. So we have to be careful what we allow into our minds in a way, because we do soak stuff in, and we being surrounded by each other, and like Dave and Jen say, reminded of the nature of life when we're getting a little bit off course. I liken it to like driving down a motorway, then you hit the rumble strip. It's like, that's almost like when we get caught up in our thoughts, it's almost like an alarm bell just to notice. And eventually we do, because life always shows us that it constantly changes.
Yeah, I don't class myself as having a label at all. What I do now is when I feel myself going into do this, do that, I've got to, that's me gone off course.
I do that.
Yeah, there's just me gone off course. That's
but that's cool, isn't it? Because we learn. By going off course is the only place we learn.
I just want to read something that Raha has written. She sent it to everyone. I'll read it out because I think it's beautiful. The unity in diversity. Have you ever thought that water is absolutely colourless, tasteless and odourless, and so too is the soil of the earth? Yet, side by side, you see rows of date trees, olive trees, orange trees, vineyards, roses, jasmine, lavender, wheat, barley, corn, potatoes, tomatoes, and on, nurtured by the same one water and the same one earth. And why such a diversity is generated from the very sameness of one water and one earth, both of which have no similarity whatsoever with all that they nurture. How come colourless bring forth all these colours, tasteless create all these flavours, and odourless produce all these fragrances? Just this miracle of creativity is enough to make one ponder for eternity and be awestruck forever. Now even go deeper. I'll go even deeper. The diversity in unity. I think that's, Lisa, I think you've spoken so beautifully to that, and Ra, thank you so much for putting that up. There's another one below it if people want to take the time to read it. Please do, because it really is beautiful. But you've spoken so beautifully today, Lisa, about life. I've really, really, really loved listening to what you've had to say. It's been really, really beautiful. And I know this girl, and what she says is how Lisa lives. You know, there's no pretense in this. There's just, Lisa found the magic of life. And it's in the magic. We're going back to that old saying of Jesus, you know, to enter the kingdom, you must become like the child. What's the child? I'm not talking about the child inside, like they use in psychology. I'm not talking about that. That's just, it's a concept. But it's that Raha's speaking about there, the finding the magic again in life, the noticing the mystery of existence. To notice the mystery of existence is to enter the kingdom of God. Because the essence of our being will always be a mystery to ourself. Because our self that's trying to figure out the mystery is an ego. It's a ball of thoughts, and the ball of thoughts cannot figure it out. But what this ball of thoughts can do is it can go to sleep. And the moment this ball of thoughts, the ego, goes to sleep, just for a moment, just for one second, can change a life in a moment, as it gets a glimpse of something that it cannot tangibly explain, as it gets a glimpse that it cannot tangibly put into words, but it feels it. It feels the experience of its presence, and it recognizes it as true. And it's there right now. It's ultimately all there truly is. Liz, thank you so much. Leanne, did you want to say something before we go off for lunch? Caught you mid-walk.
Yeah, I did also have quite a hectic week this week. And when Lisa was talking about that fearing people dying, I lived my life like that for many years, because my father committed suicide when I was 9 years old. So I had this fear that somebody would be there 1 minute and then be dead the next. And so I used to kind of almost play out people dying so that if it actually happened, it wouldn't be as traumatic to me as if I hadn't, experienced it already, So, so yeah, like I could totally relate to that. And I think through my understanding, I have let go of that completely. And my mom was here, on Thursday, and she was just really down. She's not well, and she's really not taking this whole COVID thing very well. And she started shouting at me, like in saying that you know, she could die and I wouldn't even know. Like she'd be lying in her flat dead for days, and it was like, because I'm loving her from a different place and in a different way, it doesn't mean that I don't love her. And she's not aware of it, but you know, I'll message her every day, and if I'm busy and I haven't had time to message her, I'll kind of think about it and I'll be like, oh, but she's messaged on the family group or whatever, so you know, she's okay. Like like I'll message her when I've got time a bit later. And she started like shouting and like pointing out faults, and this is your fault, and this is your fault, and this is my fault. And as I was standing there, I got overwhelmed by this huge feeling of like, whoa, this is complete ego. Like if I start telling her where I think she's at fault, this is complete ego. Like just don't. But it wasn't like it was me. It was like something had taken over. And I just went up to her and I hugged her. And she started crying. And I just held her and I just said, Mom, I love you. You know, I love her more than I ever have, I think. And I love her just because she's my mom, for no other reason. And then on Friday, my mother-in-law has lung cancer and she's been on treatment. And it's all been going really well and the doctor's been pleased with her. But she went for a scan and the results were not good and the prognosis is not good. And it's only like all these issues around mortality and even like I have started questioning, like I've never questioned my understanding and my conviction about the three principles. But then when I saw how my mother reacted and how I kind of felt like I'd made her feel, like it suddenly went like, what am I doing? And then I thought of Jessie and I thought how it's a complete opposite scenario with her. Like with her, I stood my ground and I wouldn't budge, and I wanted her to have this and to see this. Yet with my mother, I'm feeling like I'm letting her down by not loving her the way I used to. Yeah.
Beautiful, yeah. Goes to show when you kind of get over your ego, it leaves space for somebody else to be free too. No.
I love that. You know, this is it. When I could have gone one or two ways, or an infinite amount of ways, really. When your mum's kicking off and you didn't rise, you saw yourself in that moment, and all you had to offer her was love. You know, you can see it, can't you? It's every single prophet that comes into this world says love's the answer. No matter what the question, love's the answer. You live in South Africa. What's going to heal South Africa? Money. Equality. Love. Love when people drop the stories about one another and just see each other in the moment. That's all love is. And And in that moment, you saw yourself, you saw the story. Then you saw your mum and you just loved her. She cried. That stopped conflict, killed conflict dead. Killed conflict. One act of love just killed conflict. No more conflict. Your mum's got her thoughts. You're absolutely right. She has her own free mind. She's scared. I remember this one girl we worked with in South Africa, in this township. She came and she was cool. She was like, she noticed her, she was cool. Like, she was all dreaded up and she danced everywhere and she was just proper feist. I loved her. She's tiny. I would never have messed with her. She'd have destroyed me. When she came in and she sat there like, she just looked at us. And on day 2, we all came back. We said, does anybody have any insights? And mates next to her like, oh, say it. She's like, no, I'm not saying anything. And I said, you don't have to say it now, but you do have to tell me at lunchtime. She went, okay. So at lunchtime, I took her into this little room and I said, what's going on? She said, when you and Jenny spoke yesterday, and Jill, a lady called Jill, when you spoke yesterday, she said, it made no sense. None of it. I'm like, why am I here? And she said, and then I went home. She said, and I sat down on my sofa. And she said, 3 days before yesterday, which is the first day of the training, if you want to call it training, she said, I had my mobile phone stolen. And she said, the only person who'd been in my house was my neighbour. So she said, I'd gone down to my neighbour's, I'd banged on the door. She'd come to the door. She said, I pushed my way in. She said, I shouted at her, I threatened her. And she said, and with that, her husband came through. And she said, I pushed him and I goaded him and I was calling him all terrible names. She said, I wanted him to beat me. I wanted him to beat me so I could go to the police and they would have to take it serious that they'd taken my mobile phone. And she said, and with that, I walked through into the next room and there was her brother with my mobile phone and it was broken. She said, I hadn't broken my phone. They'd broken my phone. And she said, and then I came to your training, which made no sense. She said, and I went home last night and I sat down on my sofa. And she said, I was just filled with calm. And she said, and then I got up and I walked down to my neighbour's house. And she said, and I knocked on the door. She said, and the lady came to the door and she said, and I apologized to her for how I spoken to her. And she said, and her husband came through. She said, and I apologized to him. She said, I should not have spoken to you like that. You did not deserve to be spoken to like that. I am sorry. She said, I will take back my mobile phone now. Thank you. And she said, and I will fix this. She said, I want to forget about this. She said, we are neighbours. I will need you and you will need me. And she said, with that, they gave me my phone. And she said, and I went home. And I said, wow, so what? So you let people off who you know stole your mobile phone. Do you in any way feel like you've mugged yourself? Do you know, you forgave those people who stole your mobile phone. Surely you're not feeling justified in getting angry. She said, no. She said, the moment I forgave them, she said, the weight of the world came off my shoulders. And I remember this being such a powerful story. And then I said, thanks for sharing that with me. And I went out And as I walked out, I saw Jen and Jill sat down having some tea outside, some lunch. And one of the people who were on our first training in Mufflewaney Township came through, and they were crying their eyes out. And we said, "Are you okay? What's going on?" She said, "No, I'm not okay." I said, "What's going on?" She said, "I've just found out my brother-in-law's been shot dead." I said, "What's happened?" She said, "He's a taxi driver, and he pulled up at the wrong taxi rank, and somebody put a gun through the window and shot him dead." It was then that girl's story took on a whole new level of meaning. That single act of forgiveness, that single act of love, absolutely stopped dead any further repercussions. She didn't have to go to sleep with one eye open. She didn't have to go to sleep with a knife underneath the bed. People burn each other's houses down. She didn't have to worry about the stress of, are they going to burn down my house? She also doesn't have to think about all the horrible thoughts of, how am I going to get that person back? That singular act of kindness and love, that single emanation of love that came from a being that saw beyond the ego. The moment the ego died, in that moment, all that was left was compassion and understanding and love, and that killed dead any further repercussions. I remember that being one of the greatest lessons I learned. That young girl. Seems too simple that love and kindness can heal the world. It's logic. It's so logical, so obvious. We don't have to wait for everybody else to find it. We find it in ourselves. And then our world heals. And we live a happier life, more understanding life. Right, we've run over again quite a lot, actually.
I was going to say, if we're going to come back at 2, so if we come back at 2:15, is that long enough for people?
That's an hour and 20 minutes. Right. Lise, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys. Thanks everyone for your questions and just all of it really.
Awesome. Right, we'll see you after lunch. So we'll come back at 2:15 UK time.